Okay, thanks everyone for joining the advocacy landscape session. We are for Eastern time. We're here at 5:30, so I realize I'm right at the dinner hour. So hopefully, for some of us that eat early, so I apologize ahead of time if the dog and my son Cole interject. So next slide, Karen. And Karen is helping me out today with the slides. These are just disclosures that I have received travel reimbursements and grant from Takeda and some consulting reimbursements. Next. So I wanted to start by saying why I advocate. And this is Cole. You'll probably see him come and sit down beside me and join me because he likes to advocate as well. But just a little bit, if you don't know, Cole was diagnosed in 2012 at 2.5. We were living in Tennessee at the time. I had no idea what Hunter syndrome was. It wasn't in my family. It was a complete shock. And then he entered a clinical trial in 2015 at 4.5. And it's been very helpful for him. I know that it's slowed down the progression of the disease. But the disease, as Dr. Muenzer said earlier, sometimes the damage has been done before. And so that damage can't be undone. So in 2019, at the age of 9, he lost his speech, which was, as those of you who've gone through that know, that's very devastating. His last word was mommy. He's now 14 and he loves to laugh. He loves his iPad, and guess what? They're all out of power right now. And so I started my advocacy work officially in 2016. Someone asked me to speak about Hunter syndrome, and I said yes. And then in 2017, I joined the board of Project Live. I think within a month of being joining Project Live, I was the president of Project Live. I think that you can attribute that to me being from Tennessee and volunteering a little too early. So I was the president of Project Live 2018 to 2022, and then we brought in Kristen, who has done an amazing job. And we talked in the previous session about really altering your life. Certainly this diagnosis has altered my life. I moved from Tennessee to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, to be the executive director of the Muenzer MPS Research and Treatment Center in 2022. So I've almost been here 3 years, and it's wonderful to be close to such great caregiver or great physicians like Dr. Muenzer and Dr. Gelazzo. But I'm going to talk about advocacy a little bit more today. So next slide, please. So we're going to talk about advocacy efforts that are shaping specifically Hunter syndrome care, research and policy, but we'll also be talking a little broader about rare disease. And we're going to talk about some of the key initiatives and some of the legislative priorities. I'll try to keep that light so that we don't have anyone tuning out. And then I want to talk about ways that we can take action to really create meaningful change. We had some questions earlier when we were talking about the FDA of how do we get away from randomized trials? Well, advocacy. That's going to be my first answer always. So let's jump in. Next slide, Karen. So why advocate? Really, when you speak, people listen. Sometimes we're a little bit nervous because we think no one will listen, or we might be a little bit nervous. But when you speak, people will listen. They want to hear your stories. That's both at the federal government level and the local government level. And we're going to talk a lot about the government. And I want to say, first off, I have a good friend who says that we're not the Republican Party, we're not the party of the Democrats, we are the party of rare disease. And so I think when we're thinking about advocacy, that's sort of the overall mindset of we're advocating for our kids. And so we're going to talk to both parties. Raise awareness of MPS and rare diseases. We know this is a rare disease. Dr. Muenzer talked about it really being an ultra rare disease of maybe 500 across the US. So our voices are important. Think about that. There's 500 voices times 2, maybe, to have 1,000 voices that are speaking about MPS 2. So it's really important that we talk about it. And that advocacy can look like advocacy in your schools. It can look like in your local community. It could be with nurses. It could be with your physicians. There's a lot of ways that you can advocate. And then really to bring hope to MPS 2 families and the broader community. By speaking up, you're giving others courage to do that. Be a mentor. If you've been doing this for a while, that's your opportunity to bring someone else in. If you've been doing it 1 year, you've got some experience, so share that experience. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can get involved towards the end. Next slide. So I want to back up just a little bit because we've talked a lot about research, and we're going to talk about the NIH and the FDA. So I think it's important that we have an understanding of what research looks like. So we have basic and preclinical research, and this is where you're studying biology and the disease processes. This is what we sometimes see in our animal research. So that is done sometimes at the academic level. And then at some point, it's translated into clinical research. And so that's more when we're involving people. So we bring people in and we do clinical research. This can be done, again, it could be in an academic institute. It could be done by a pharmaceutical company. But this is really when you're bringing people in because you've proven in your preclinical research that it works or it should work, and then you're bringing into people to make sure to check and see if it does work. And then we're going to just translate it to discovery into practice. So if we bring it into practice, that's called implementation research. And that's when you're at a point where you've got a proven intervention and you're bringing it to the market or to a larger population. So the reason I want to talk about that is you're going to hear, or you probably are hearing in the news, some about the funding for the NIH. Our message from the rare disease community hasn't changed. It's always to include strong funding for the NIH. NIH research is so important. It's the largest funder of biomedical research in the world. When you think about the NIH community, it's not just those that are in Washington. It's also the 330,000 scientists and research personnel at over 2,500 research institutes across all the 50 states. So I want to talk a little bit about that community. So we have research universities. 56% of our basic scientific research takes place at research universities. These universities have applied for grants from the NIH. So again, that's important because that's sometimes where the foundational research is happening. From there, we have startups and spinoffs. Sometimes the research that is done at the university can result in a spinoff or startup, and then that can lead to a pharmaceutical or biotechnology company picking these up and actually funding research to develop the next generation of drugs. So you see it's sort of this domino effect of getting the grant from NIH, starting the research, bringing it in to clinical trials, and then bringing it to the market. So that's why when we talk about NIH funding, it's so important that we continue to ask for strong funding for the NIH. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the FDA. We also are strong supporters of the FDA. We've heard a lot of talk today about why the FDA is important, because they ultimately are going to approve the drugs that many of our kids are on right now, and many of our kids are waiting to get on. So one of the things that Advocacy has done, and a lot of this you've probably heard through Every Life Foundation, is the FDA has created a rare disease innovation hub. This was so important. We kept asking for a rare disease center of excellence, and this is our answer, the Innovation Hub. But it has really 3 goals. Goal 1, to further advance regulatory science of rare disease therapies. So these are really creating opportunities for consideration of novel endpoints and encouraging interaction with the broader rare disease community. And the goal to enhance and strengthen coordination and alignment between medical product centers with a particular focus on CDER and CBER. So there's two parts that you'll hear us talk about: CDER, which is the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, and then CBER, which is the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. And these two different parts are responsible for looking at different drugs. So for instance, CDER, you're going to have, I always think of this as drugs. That's going to be more of your Denali or your JCR. CBER, biologics, that's your gene therapy. That's your Regenix Bio. So there's two different parts of this, and they are reviewing these separately. And one of the reasons that we have this Rare Disease Innovation Hub is because we need more coordination across them. There was some, like when we were talking about biomarkers before, there was some consideration from CBER about biomarkers, but we weren't hearing anything about consideration for biomarkers from CDER. So this Innovation Hubs brings these two groups together, asking them to focus on working together, having the same sort of requirements so that we get some consistency across. And then the third is to create a centralized point of contact for external partners. You know, before we really were, how do you contact the FDA? And there were a lot of different ways to do that. And so this is really saying this is a centralized point of contact for everyone. They have a head of the Rare Innovation Hub who is available. You can have more information on FDA's website about the Rare Innovation Hub, and they have their own website as well for more information. So hopefully you understand a little bit more about the FDA's role after today's presentations about clinical trials and what Dr. Muenzer talked to you about the heparan sulfate as a biomarker. Next slide. Okay, now we're getting really, really deep into it. So you may have heard this where people have said, well, we've got to advocate for the Rare Pediatric Disease Priority Review Voucher, PRV. So basically what the voucher does is it gives a company priority review, meaning usually a drug to get approved through the FDA takes 15 years. This is sort of a card that says the FDA will review your disease a little bit, or your product a little faster because it is for a rare disease. So what's happened in the past is this happened in 2012 that they created these vouchers, and they wanted to really expedite the process and development of drugs that for rare disease. So during that time, this program has incentivized 58 new treatment options and for over 40 rare communities, and including those that didn't have any other treatments. So in 2024, the House passed the Give Kids a Chance Act, and within this act included the Creating Hope Reauthorization Act of 2024. And this is the original bill to reauthorize PRV program. Unfortunately, it was not, it was excluded from the final bill. We had hoped that it would be part of a bipartisan healthcare policy package in December 2024, included in the end of year government funding extension, but it was excluded. So it expired on December 20th, 2024. So that means they're not issuing these priority review vouchers. If you already have one, then those aren't affected. But if you, right now, there's not a priority review voucher program. So what we want to ask is we want to urge Congress to reauthorize by passing the Give Kids a Chance Act of 2025. And so this sort of takes it out of that big grouping and puts it as a single bill, HR 1262, and then it's going to be soon introduced into the Senate. So this is a very specific ask, Give Kids a Chance Act of 2025, asking your congressmen and congresswomen to put a priority on priority review voucher and bring that back. And you can see at Every Life Foundation, they have more information about how you can take action. And they actually have templates on their website that you can use to send to your Congress people. Next slide. So Kristen said earlier that we need to celebrate our victories. So this is us celebrating. If you remember back in 2022, MPS 2 was added to the recommended uniform screening panel, which I'll talk about on the next slide. But that was a great victory, and there was a lot of people working behind the scenes to get that approved. Putting together a package just to get MPS 2 added takes years. So this was a huge victory. And this is some of us when we were watching, we watched it sort of as a watch party to see if they were going to approve and put MPS 2 on the RUSP. So next slide. So what does that mean? Well, every child goes through newborn screening. And as part of newborn screening, there are certain diseases that are part of that process. Now, MPS 2 right now is about 12 states are starting to or have started to screen for MPS 2. So let's back up just a little bit. What is RUSP alignment? So the RUSP is recommended uniform screening panel. And as you can see from the name, recommended. So it doesn't necessarily tell the states that they have to put this on their screening panel. So what we encourage the states to do to pass their own legislation for RUSP alignment. And that means that when a disease is added to the RUSP, then the state automatically takes it on and says, yes, they will add this disease to their screening panel. So MPS 2 is on that RUSP right now. And as I said, you can see the 12 states that have adopted the legislation over to your right. So a request always is to talk with your Congress person and asking them to look at RUSP alignment. That's certainly something we continue to ask. Every Life has taken up the mission of about 3 or 4 states a year. But obviously we need advocates at the local level to get this done. We have an example of MPS 1 being added in RUSP alignment in Alabama from advocates going in and talking at their local state house. So that's our ask is, would you require the states to add new recommendations to their screening panels so that we don't have to go state by state anymore. Once it's added to the RUSP, then the other states will automatically align with that. Next slide, Karen. So we've also been hearing a lot about insurance coverage, and we were asked about accelerated approval. Is that covered by insurance? And Kristen gave a good answer and said, you know, it should be because it is approval, but we're not really taking any chances with this. Project Alive is sponsoring a payer education project with payers, physicians, and advocates to talk about approved therapies and therapies in the pipeline and our overall needs. And then their outcome is going to be a publication, which will be disseminated through the largest payer journal to try and reach the payers, help them understand what this means for accelerated approval, help them understand why they should cover these drugs. And the hope is to help better understand the disease and then set some policies around that. Medicaid, we always want to advocate for overall funding and strong funding for Medicaid. Right now, there's a lot of discussion and a lot of worry about Medicaid. You know, it's something we just have to keep an eye on. And we need to continue to advocate for access and coverage for accelerated approval drugs. Next slide. I wanted to tell you a couple of things that are going on right now that are very sort of uplifting to think about that we're doing. It's been mentioned before, the MPS II transplant study. We have, I think when Cole was diagnosed in 2012, I asked, what about transplant? And the answer was, well, we don't have a lot of information or data about that. And then the answer is we have more information now, but we don't have a lot of data about this. So this is really an opportunity to get data from those who have gone through transplant, identify the number of individuals with MPS, understand their overall clinical outcomes, and then family experiences. So this is a study going on by the Muenzer Center and with Project Alive. And if you go to our booth, you'll find out more about that. Thank you, Kristen. It's in the Muenzer booth. There's also an airway consensus paper. There's a lot of concern about our children's airways because they do get a little bit harder. I'm sorry, my dog is barking in the background. It's her dinner time. The airway consensus paper, trying to understand how do we deal with airways that are difficult. And so this is sponsored by the MPS Society in the UK, brought together experts, ENTs, surgeons, physicians, parents, advocates, to talk about the troubles that we have with our airway, because we all know when our kids go into anesthesia, that's one of our biggest concerns is how is their airway. There's also the MPS variant database. This is something that's been a project that Dr. Muenzer has been wanting to do for quite a while. For a lot of our kids, when they're diagnosed, we don't know the severity of the disease. They may have a novel mutation. For some, we know because we've seen that mutation before. So what Dr. Muenzer is wanting to do is to bring together all of that information, the information from the literature in one place so that we have a searchable database. And then we've talked in some of the different groups about behavior. So last week, and the last week we brought together experts in behavior, not just in MPS, but also behavior in autism, in some other areas of rare disease, and brought everyone together, and we had a discussion about, what are the consensus guidelines that we should be talking about for behavior. And one of those things was, as someone brought up in an earlier session, does medication work? Well, that's one of the questions we're trying to get down to. For now, I think part of it came out of there. It may work for some and it may not work for others. And that's some of the information that's coming out in our consensus conference. And that was sponsored by Project Live and for Action for Aiden. And then you may have heard this, we are working on MPS II treatment guidelines. And this is going to be a guide. You may have seen the Cure Sanfilippo sponsored for Sanfilippo syndrome. This is similar guidelines talking about the different parts, the different affected systems that our boys have and treatment guidelines for those. So that's some of the projects that are going on right now. Karen, next slide. Dr. Muenzer talked about the MPS Center consultation program, and why I had a few minutes, I wanted to bring this up because this is available to everyone. During the consultation program, and this is a picture of our beautiful center here in Chapel Hill, patients and families can meet with MPS specialists. And this is especially valuable for those that may not have an MPS specialist if you don't live in the Bay Area or live in Chicago or a major hospital that might have an MPS specialist. We can bring you here to Chapel Hill. They'll also meet with a genetic counselor that can talk more about their specific genetic mutation. And you heard earlier from Leanne, and she's our developmental tester, and you can also do developmental testing. The important thing that I like about this is the families will actually leave with a plan. So to follow up with their local physicians, right? And as we've said in some earlier sessions, and Dr. Burton said, and Dr. Muenzer said as well, is these specialists are here for you. They'll answer questions. So they're available for follow-up questions, and certainly when you come for the consultation program, they're available. They're open to any MPS patient with a diagnosis of MPS. So this is all the MPSs. The consultation visit is there's no cost to you if you have Medicaid or your income is less than 250% of the federal poverty level. We cover the airfare, 2 parents, lodging or 2 caregivers, local transportation, and the clinical fees. And this is something that Dr. Muenzer wanted to do to give back to the community, and understanding that not everyone can see a specialist. And we all know in this disease, it's so important to get good medical advice. Again, you can look in the booth for more information about the clinical consultation program, or you can contact Lindsay Torres, or you can contact me, and Lindsay's emails there as well. Next slide, Karen. So the last slide is rare disease when we advocated with Every Life on Capitol Hill. I think this was last year's picture. But this is a chance for you to get involved and make your voice heard. You go through some training at the beginning of the week, Monday and Tuesday, and then you're up on Capitol Hill talking with your local folks. So when I was living in Tennessee, I went to speak to my Congress people and senators from Tennessee. So you would do for your state. And it's really wonderful because you meet other advocates that may be advocating for other rare diseases, make new friends, learn from them. We haven't had a tremendous amount of participation from the MPS2 community. If you look really close, you can see Kyle down there in the front. But for the most part, we would love to see you on Capitol Hill. If you can't get to Capitol Hill, then certainly you can go to your local within your state. And certainly there's information on the Every Life site. There's information on the NORD site, MPS Society, or you can get in touch with Project Alive as well. Next slide. Is that it? All right, I've given you a lot of information. Some of it I hope was interesting to you and also encouraged you to get involved. You can certainly always reach out to me at kimstevens@med.unc.edu. And I encourage you to get involved, advocate. If you can't advocate at the federal or your local level, then advocate at your child's school, advocate with your child's physician. Be your advocate. And you don't have to start big. You can start very small, and then it will grow as you get more confidence. But remember, your story is very unique and people want to hear your story. So Kristen, do we have any questions? Let me see. I can see in the chat.
Let's see. We had lots of good discussion. I was just clarifying with someone about the consensus meeting, and they had asked if it was available to view, and I was just explaining that no, that was more of a closed meeting. And really how that process is going to go is from that conversation, it was kind of the starting point, and a really formalized survey essentially will go out to even more experts. And the idea is that between all of that survey responses and in our conversations, that we come up with consensus statements that can then go into a publication, which, as I mentioned, will be something that not only you as parents and family members can use with both advocating with insurance companies, but also school IEPs. I know so many of us have a hard time getting access to ABA therapy that was brought up earlier, or getting medications and things like that. So, or sleep safe beds. I mean, the list goes on, and that will really serve as a tool for us to use, but also your clinicians can use that when they're battling with the insurance companies to get approval for those things, and to also teach them how to help manage your child's we say manage behaviors. Sometimes that's part of the discussion too, is that it's not just a behavior, it's sometimes a sign of pain or a way to communicate, so there's a lot of things to that will all go in that paper. And what we hope to do too is eventually transform it into kind of a I guess more of a parent friendly or just kind of layman's terms format to be used, which will be easier, I think, too, in situations like bringing it to an IEP meeting than having kind of all these very technical clinical terms. So,
Yeah,
and
thanks.
it looks like someone asked, is there any guidance anywhere on what to take to our local representatives? I'd love to advocate, but I don't know where to start. Kim, I will let you answer that, but I also wanted to add that we recently on Rare Disease Day posted a one pager and also a template letter. And those are all, you could find it on the Facebook page, but you could also go on our website under the community resources. They're both editable. So the letter is a template. The one pager is complete, but you can go in. I have my son's story there, but you can go in and change it and put your child's story, your family story, and your photos and pass those along to representatives. But Kim, please share all the other millions of opportunities that we have to connect.
Well, I think they're asking specifically for local, so I'm going to address that. So one of the
Mm.
things that locally we talked about with newborn screening, if your state isn't one of the ones that has some RUSP alignment, that's helpful. Also, it's good to go in and introduce yourself to your local representatives. Let them know, hey, you've got a rare disease family in your community, because you never know what they can help you with. They can help you. Kristen, I don't know if you have some examples of help, but helping with insurance, helping to get, how do you get that seat safe bed? And so knowing your local government officials is so helpful when you need an advocate, because that's what they're there for. I remember meeting, sorry, Cole is advocating for dinner. Um, I remember meeting one of the Tennessee representatives on a flight, and we were on the trolley, and I took the opportunity to talk to him, and his first word was, what can I do for you? I work for you. And kind of remembering that, I think always helps you talk with the representatives, know that they work for you. That's their job, to listen to their constituents. So, Kristen, I'd love to, the template letter what is that? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something that you could send to your Congress people, your senators alike, and it focuses on kind of the hot topic items that we chose around legislation for Rare Disease Day. And Kim, you talked about all of them. The Give Kids a Chance Act, the just general funding and resources for the FDA and the NIH, all of those types of areas. So it's kind of that broader national topic. Certainly, you can always drop down to a local level. I know for me, one of the things that we have here in California that I want to have been trying to address with my local representatives is their after school program. And it's supposed to be inclusive and all of those things, but it gets filled up and there's no exceptions for kids with disabilities. And one of the things that I always express is that, well, you have a child here who uses a wheelchair, is nonverbal, has to get his diaper changed, and there's nowhere else here for him to go. We live in a pretty rural town, and the after school program at the school is the only option for him. So when you put him on the wait list, unlike other kids, he goes from losing an option to losing his only option, and that's not equity. So I think it's important to know that you can reach out to your governor, your council people, your mayor, if you have one. I don't even have one. We live in an unincorporated area, so I have to go up the chain there. But you can do that. And I think, like Kim mentioned, it's super important. And every time that you're reaching out to them, to very clearly say, you have a constituent in your area that X, Y, and Z, right? That has Hunter syndrome, that has a disability, so that they know you're part of their community that they serve. And you can always go on and find online who, if you just Google it, really make it simple, you can see who your representatives are and reach out to them. And if there's ever anything that you need assistance with, you can always reach out to us or to Kim. I know she'd be happy to give you some guidance. And, that's how we make a change. It's how we make a difference. And it's not fair that that burden is put onto us, but that is the way that it is. And, it's being part of the solution there. And sometimes it's getting that little bit of, I guess, kind of healing to know that you helping your child actually helped a whole lot of other children too.
Yeah, I think, you can request a meeting from your local um, folks. You can request a meeting at the federal level as well, and go in and talk and share your stories. But again, what Kristen said, letting them know you're there, letting them hear your story. Dr. Munzer talked earlier about heparan sulfate as a biomarker. Some of our advocacy work was around talking to the FDA about that. Certainly, you can always talk to your representatives and say, and we've done this, gone to the Hill and said, we want to put some pressure on the FDA in a kind way, let them know that we in the rare disease community are watching and that we need biomarkers. I think Ernesto brought up earlier whether we randomize trials. Well, we've got to ask for that change. Nobody wants randomized trials. But until we have biomarkers or ways that we can show that a drug works without having to compare it to a control group or a sham group, then that's what we're stuck with, right? So we need to be thinking about this, getting out, getting your voice heard. Certainly always reach out to Project Live, MPS Society, NORD, Every Life. All of these different groups have on their websites asks, they have templates, and that's kind of how you can get started until you find your own voice.
And I put in the chat a link to Every Life Foundation's tip sheet, and it has a ton of resources, one of which is kind of what Kim mentioned about how do you set up a meeting with your representatives, all of those kinds of things that you might be wondering. This is a great tool because I don't think any of us have really come into this with, going to school for policy, so it can be a lot and it can be overwhelming. I utilize those who dedicate
Mhm.
all their time to it, which Every Life and Nord are great examples of that. Certainly, if you haven't done so yet, sign up for their action alerts and their newsletters. There's tons of things that come out and it's really great. You just type in your name, think your email and your address, and it'll auto find who your representatives are. It gives you the template. You can put your few sentences to personalize it, hit send, and it'll auto email all of it to your representative. So it's so easy. It takes just a few seconds. Half the time you can keep the same few sentences over and over again, and save it on your computer somewhere and you don't have to come up with something again. So really easy, and that's a quick and great way to know that you're making sure that your voice is heard. And there's just so much that's always happening in the world of legislation, and it's hard to stay on top of it. So utilize those tools that do make it easy for us.
And don't think you have to be a policy expert.
Right.
Certainly, it's changing every day. Some of the landscape, as we talked about, what we were advocating for now, we may not have been advocating for 4 years ago, and it changes. So you don't have to be that policy expert. There are those tip sheets. I don't know that many times I've ever walked into any of the offices and gone over the policy with them, word by word. I always start with my story and why this is important to me. And then they ask for what bill it is. It's HR 1262 or whatever Senate bill, da, 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 da. And they have that and they'll look it up. And then you can leave that behind with them as well. But don't ever feel like you have to be an expert on that particular policy. Just know why it's important to you and your story and share. And again, like Kristen has said, and we've emphasized, is letting them know that there's a constituent that's concerned about that. Their constituent is, I'm concerned about NIH funding. I'm concerned about FDA funding, and starting there.
Mhm. And I think that's important too, because what you're doing in those moments is bringing in the human aspect to what these bills are.
Mhm.
They're looking at those all day long. It's a bunch of, legal jargon. They're applying it to budgets and numbers and reminding them that this isn't just a number in the budget line. This is a human being, that some of these things are literally life and death for us, or really impact our quality of life, and reminding them of that, and how what they choose to do can make this lasting impact on the children and families in their communities. I think that that's so important. So like Kim said, you don't need to be able to rattle off all the legalese. They know enough of that. We're there to bring the human element to it.
Yeah, and I think one other thing is during your meetings, you may meet with a staff member. That's okay. It doesn't mean that your representative doesn't have time for you. It's this, they have so much that they need to cover that they have these staff members that are dedicated to health or they're dedicated to a different type of policy. So when they meet with you, you're going to have the discussion with them. They'll bring it back to your senator or your representative. So make sure if you do meet with a staffer that you're treating them courteously and realize that that's their job and they're the policy experts.
Yep, and never feel like you're doing it too much. I swear, everything
Right.
I send my representative over and over and over again, and he'll always write back to me, or whoever is writing for him, and says, "Yeah, we're already signed on to that bill. I don't care. I'm going to send it to you every time, just so that you remember that this is important and don't lose focus on it." So,
That's right.
any other questions that people have for Kim?
Like they're ready to
Okay.
have dinner.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kim. And thanks for, sticking around at the caregiver panel and helping me out as my voice heals. You'll see me with the cough drop for the rest of the afternoon here. So I appreciate that. And I hope you get both your son and your puppy fed.
And me.
And you, yes, don't forget yourself. And I will see everybody else at our last formal session in just a moment. So hop on over. See you there. Thank you. Bye.